Ahead of schedule? Can we be ahead of schedule?
That clock's off. Perfect. Good evening and welcome to the Monday, February 8th, 2021 Litchfield Board of Selectmen meeting. The board has just come out of a paperwork review, and I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask everyone to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item this evening is the review and approval of consent items. We have an account payroll manifest of February 1st, 2021 in the sum of $1,646,410.93, and February 9th, 2021 in the sum of $252,453.56. We have a payroll manifest of February 4th, 2021 in the sum of $61,769.05, and February 11th, 2021 in the sum of $61,005.96. We have the December 2020 Treasurer's Reconciliation. We have the January 2021 Tax Collector's Reconciliation. We have the January 2021 Town Clerk Reconciliation. We have Purchase Order M-21-04 in the sum of $20,000 for portable radios. We have a report of timber cut request, map 15, lot 14. Are there any items members would like to remove from consent? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Larry,
Don't mind them. I'm sorry. I'll second.
second by Mr. Lynch. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Mr. Larry?
Aye.
Mr. LaSalle's?
Aye.
Mr. Lynch?
Aye.
Ms. Queenan?
Aye.
I am also an aye. Motion carries 5-0-0.
Apologize.
Is there any business that members would like to add this evening? Hearing none, public input will occur no earlier than 6:45 PM. The first item tonight is the review of the January 25th, 2021 meeting minutes. Has everybody had a chance to review, and do we have any comments or changes?
Make a motion to approve them?
We have a motion by Mr. Larry.
I'll second it.
We have a second by Mr. Lynch. All those in favor? Mr. Larry? Mr. LaSalle's?
Aye.
Mr. Lynch?
Aye.
Ms. Queenan?
Aye.
I am also an aye. Motion carries 5-0-0. The next item is William Cornelius, State Forester. Mr. Brown.
Okay, thank you. As you recall, at your last meeting, we received a report from some concerned citizens about the activity that occurred at the State Forest, and specifically the closure of two trails, one Calvin Loop, and I believe the other one, Two Bridges. And based on that feedback that the citizens were giving the selectmen asked me to reach out to the State Forester to have a conversation today about what led up to the events that caused the closure, and to discuss ways that we can improve communications and to discuss ways, if possible, to try to reopen these trails. I think we all agreed, based on what we had learned, that there was one trail that probably was constructed very, not too many, maybe a year ago, a year and a half, and it had not really existed. But the other trail, Calvin's Loop, there was some question about how long that one had actually been around. So I reached out to the State Forester, Mr. Cornelius, and he has volunteered and agreed to be here with us this evening. He did meet last week with the Conservation Commission, and they had a very lengthy discussion about the same subject matter this evening. I understand that some of you have watched that meeting. So, feel free to, we'll go ahead and have the presentation, but if we feel that we can water it down a little bit, then, I guess we can have that conversation. That's the State Forester. There he is.
Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Just one quick correction for the minutes. Just as clarification, I am not what we would actually call in our department the state forester. I'm just one of many state foresters in the state. And one of my properties that I oversee and manage is Litchfield State Forest. So just wanted to make that quick
Thank you for the
correction there.
clarification.
Yeah. Yeah, so today, Mr. Brown had asked me to come talk to you guys, and I also brought with me Scott Rolfe, who's the regional forester for the south region of the state, and he's my supervisor. And so we're going to kind of run through the same presentation that we gave to the Conservation Commission, but hoping that some of you guys had tuned into that or possibly listened to that afterwards. We're going to try to kind of breeze through it a little quicker, so then we can get to some of your direct concerns on the subject. So I'm going to let Scott start in first, and he's going to give you guys a little bit of introduction about our management in general on our state lands, and then I'll go into some specifics on Litchfield.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, folks. Well, like Billy said, I'm the South Regional State Forester for the South Region, and Billy's a Field Forester for the South Region. We both work for the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, Division of Forest and Lands Forest Management Bureau, who oversees all the state reservations in the South. So I've got a few slides here I can show you folks if I can share my screen.
Okay, we have it.
Good. So managing recreation trails on state reservations, popular topic, not just in Litchfield, but across our state as more and more folks get out into the woods and recreate and try to social distance. Our public lands have seen unprecedented use over this past year. And I will say all open space lands with recreation trails of some sort have seen the same use. And sometimes abuse. The purpose of our state reservations are under several RSAs under state law, and one of them is to provide habitat for both plants and animals. Another one is, and an important one, is a sustainable source of forest products which support the local economy. Also, in today's world, mitigating climate change is very important, and that's a big part of us managing our forests for both resiliency and carbon sequestration and storage. And most importantly today, a place for multiple use recreation. As we know, we have some trails on Litchfield State Forest and many of our state reservations throughout the state. But most important is, as managers of public land, we try to balance all these uses and minimize any impacts to the natural resources that we're trying to manage. So under the multiple use philosophy of managing state reservations, like I said, we oversee the state forests. We manage the trees, and parks manages the developed recreation areas. And those developed recreation areas are such as Bear Brook State Park or the campgrounds, day use areas, picnic areas, and that sort of thing. So we manage and own about 170,000 acres throughout the state, and about nearly 60,000 of those reside in the southern portion of the state. Our focus on state forests on these state reservations is for natural resource management, both the wildlife habitat and the timber resource, but we also allow passive recreation on trails that were developed and installed in a proper manner. So here I'm going to let Billy take it over because he's going to get a little more in depth on Litchfield State Forest and sort of where we've gone with that over the past few months. Let's see if I can get that on.
Yep, so I'm just gonna go ahead and share my screen here in a second.
Did you get it, Billy?
It's still showing your screen right now.
Still showing my screen. Oh, now I just lost everything. Oh, I got it. I got it.
Oh, I know.
Should be all yours now.
You'd think we would know exactly how to do all this technology stuff by now.
You're young enough.
After a year of this, right?
You're young enough. You can do it.
Everybody uses some different platform. Some is Teams, some is Zoom, others Cisco.
Okay, so yeah, so that was a good little introduction about how we do multiple use management on our state properties. So some of the details as far as the Litchfield trails go. So just kind of a little bit of history and background into discovering and then closing these trails. So in the spring of 2020, I was out in Litchfield State Forest for the first time in a long time to assess the condition of the forest stands from the last treatment, forest management treatment that we had done, and to kind of scout things out a little bit for an upcoming timber sale. And so while I was out there in the spring, I observed multiple trails that were not mapped within our database of trails and maps and forest stands of our properties, as well as signage that had been placed throughout the state forest, naming trails and also naming swamps and vernal pools and other things. And also finding some different things, such as a bench that's located kind of out in a little clearing that someone had made overlooking a swamp, and just various things that we had no record of. So about that same time that I was out there, the Litchfield Conservation Commission actually contacted me because they were having some issues with some wetland infringement on a couple of their trails on bordering properties. And they were going to be closing. I think at first they thought they were going to be closing the trails down, and then they decided to do maintenance work. But they were letting me know that they were closing trails down that came into Litchfield State Forest. And so just wanted to let me know. And so at that same time, I told them that, hey, I just was out here and I just found a couple trails that, we have no knowledge of on our property. So I'm going to be looking into those and, possibly closing them down if we can't verify those trails. So during the summer, this past summer, I was conducting a forest inventory in Litchfield State Forest. So I was out there quite regularly for a month or two. And while I was out there, continued to monitor those rogue trails that I had found to see what type of activity levels they were getting and if there was any more construction on them. So during the past summer, I discovered another trail that was being created off of the Twin Bridges or Two Bridges trail, and also found another rogue trail that was being built or expanded in another area of the state forest. And so, within those trails that I've been finding. They included insufficient wetlands crossings. So, throughout the year as I was working, you know, double check the database to make sure that we weren't missing any trails. Researched with our land management team to see if they had, gotten, permits to construct trails in the past on Litchfield, and, talked with the previous foresters who've managed Litchfield State Forest to see if they knew of any of these trails, all of which turned up with zero information. So, after lengthy research into the trails, this past winter, I finally got some time in my work schedule, and so went out and closed those trails down and made interpretive signage that I placed at the trailheads, explaining why those trails were closed down, along with my contact information. If people had questions, they could contact me. So I'm sure you guys are fairly familiar with these maps now, but the map on the left is a map that shows the trails as I found them in the spring of 2020, and the map on the right is showing what are the actual approved trails for Litchfield State Forest. So, we have definitely reasons why we close trails. And so we just wanted to go over some of those real quickly. The first couple slides here of why we close these trails specifically are somewhat legal in manner, and then the other ones, the other reasons lean more towards natural resource protection. So these trails were created without proper procedure and review from all the DNR resource professionals. Everything I found, we have no record of these trails at all within our system. These trails included unsafe and unapproved bridge designs, and some of those bridge designs would also block the wetlands from proper flowage during high water times. And the trails were also signed and blazed with paint. The most recent blazing actually happened just this fall. People color coordinating blazes and just randomly painting trees along the trail throughout the forest, also without any permission. So then, getting a little bit more into the natural resource side of things, these trails fragmented important wildlife habitat and significantly reduce the size of undisturbed area for wildlife within the state forest. And the trails that were decommissioned, they support no connectivity to other trail systems, such as the trail running to Musquash or any trails running off of Litchfield and onto abutting town properties. So there's, we didn't lose any connectivity or any trail systems connecting to abutters, I guess is basically what we're saying. And that's one of the things that we look at, is there going to be an impact to other trail systems, and there is no impact to other trail systems. And so removing these trails, it offers resident wildlife in the area a greater opportunity to live an undisturbed life, and decreases chance of mortality, without really diminishing the recreational opportunity within the state forest in the surrounding area. So one of the things that has kind of come up through different discussions is how we actually decommission these trails. So over a long history of land management, the state has figured out that just flagging and blocking off the end of a trail, it really doesn't deter anyone. trails where if trails were made illegally, it's not going to stop someone. They can rip down a flagging or pull out a sign pretty easily, and then they have their trail back. So we have to take a little bit more drastic measures in order to prevent people from reopening trails that we have closed. And so one of the main methods that we use, it's called hinge cutting of trees. And so these trees, they're not just willy-nilly gone out and cut, whatever tree we want. When I'm out there closing down a trail, I'm taking my time and picking understory stems, and choosing lower quality trees that will never become, a real high quality tree in the future, or a tree that's, suppressed from other trees growing over the top of it, and most likely in the next few years would die anyway because of lack of growing room. So we don't go out and cut mature trees. We cut understory stems, and so by doing the hinge cutting, it significantly deters use of the trail and deters someone from going back out and reopening that trail. And it also creates wildlife habitat, because hinge cutting leaves the tree connected to the stump, and it'll still continue to green up and grow for the next several years, and so it creates excellent wildlife habitat. And it's also a form of timber stand improvement, since we're technically choosing the lower quality or suppressed trees, removing those from the stand and leaving better quality trees behind technically improves the forest health. And then after we hinge cut, we do flag off the ends of the trail, just to kind of notify people that, hey, the trail has been closed. And we install the signs, like I'm sure you've seen the signs out there or seen pictures of the signs, and explains the reasoning behind why we close the trails, provides information, the contact information for the forester managing the property, so people can contact that forester if they have questions. So in the past, at the conservation meeting, we had Jim Ayler, who's the habitat program supervisor for New Hampshire Fish and Game. He came and did this part of the project or presentation. So I'm just going to give you a couple of his slides here and not do as good of a job as he does, but kind of give you a little bit of the information. And if you want more information on this, I would encourage you to go watch the Conservation Commission meeting and see the whole presentation from Jim. But so Fish and Game created this tool, Trails for People and Wildlife, to help land managers balance recreational uses on their lands, and if they're installing trails, figure out the right place to put those trails in. And so that tool was not made up of just any old data, or just thoughts. So they studied 274 papers across North America and Europe, and looked at all different species of wildlife to come up with the data that they used for this tool that they created. And so this is an example of the heat map that their tool creates. You have low impact habitat, which would be these real dark blues, and then works all the way up to very high habitat, which is this really dark red here. So you can kind of see this side of Litchfield State Forest is pretty low impact, a few areas of moderate to high impact, but very small. And then this top side of Litchfield State Forest has a lot more high impact and very high impact areas with moderate impact in between. And it is important to realize that even if there's an area of moderate impact in between two higher impact areas, it can be high impact if there's something that's dividing those travel corridors between those high impact areas. So then on top of the heat map of the impact areas of where you really don't want to put a trail, there's also what's called a corridor of influence around that trail. So someone's presence, whether it's someone walking or someone riding a snowmobile or even driving a car, that your presence can be detected by wildlife, that's actually off the trail, and the distance that this impacts the wildlife is called the corridor of influence. So in their studies that they found that a variety of species, it affects them at different distances, small reptiles and amphibians up to 60 feet, birds up to 150 feet, and mammals up to 400 feet away from that trail. And for everyone, since it's the day after the Super Bowl, a great comparison is that 400 feet is actually 1 1/3 football fields in distance. So it's a trail has a lot more impact to it than just where your feet are actually landing. So if we take the trails on Litchfield State Forest and then we overlay a buffer showing the corridor of influence of these trails, this is with all the trails as I found them in the spring of 2020, including the two that I closed down. You see that quite a bit of that property is covered in that green buffer area. And so Litchfield State Forest is 330 acres in size. And when you add those buffers, the corridor of influence covers 237 acres, or 72% of Litchfield State Forest. So that really doesn't meet our our motivation of multiple use management, because it's not really multiple use at that point. Certain uses are taking higher influence of that property. So then if we remove the two trails that I closed down, you can see that the corridor of influence falls. There's quite a larger area that's not influenced by the trails, and most of this corridor of influence is now held into that low impact area, and it releases the higher habitat sensitivity areas of Litchfield State Forest for wildlife use. So if we pull those two trails out, it drops our corridor of influence for the property down to 167 acres, which is only 51% of the property. And so this eliminates 70 acres of impact and basically balances out the use of wildlife to recreation. And so I know the trails group that's been starting to form is proposing to reopen the Calvin Loop Trail. So to do a corridor of influence, if we were to reinstall Calvin Loop on the property, you can see there's quite a bit of impact again into that higher sensitivity area. And it brings your level of impact back up to 227 acres of impact, or 69% of the property, which it only eliminates 10 acres of the impact that we're trying to remove from the rogue trails. So that's kind of the main part of the about the trails itself. I know you guys also wanted me to give you guys a quick update about the upcoming timber sale. So I don't know if you want me to jump into that now, or if we want to talk about the trails first and the timber sale later.
Let's pause for a moment and see if anybody has any comments or questions. Board and Mr. LaSalle?
Yes, I'm interested in who is responsible for the communication from you folks? I understand that it's a state forest. You have ownership of the state forest. But in our case, I feel in this particular situation, there was a lack of communication between you folks and the town, namely the selectmen. I understand we have the Conservation Commission, but they really don't have any jurisdiction over the state forest. We have community groups that have taken it upon themselves to, I guess, build trails and so forth. What I would have liked to have seen is more communication between you and us, explaining the reasoning for closing the trails before it happened. Now, I understand there was communication maybe to the Conservation Commission, but the Conservation Commission really doesn't have jurisdiction over it. So I would have liked to have seen communication to the community in some way.
Well, so I guess the typically your Conservation Commission would have is the one who manages the trails on the town properties, you know, and is influenced in that way. And so, you know, our first step, if we're going to be discussing issues with trails, you know, with the town, would be to discuss that with the Conservation Commission because they deal with the trails. You know, it is a state forest, and so we as the state have jurisdiction over that state forest. And then also the trails that we close down are completely internal rogue trails within our boundaries. And so, you know, we're dealing with an internal problem within our property itself. You know, if it was any trail that ran off of Litchfield State Forest and onto a budding town property, or if it was the trail that ran off of Litchfield State Forest and connected the whole trail system to the Musquash Conservation Area, there would be more communication with something like that because it impacts the surrounding properties, where here we're dealing completely with an internal issue that we discovered within our property that we manage.
Did you communicate with the Conservation Commission before you shut down the trail?
So I communicated with the Conservation Commission in the spring, and I had told them that I was looking into these trails and that we didn't have any data on the trails, and that if they were rogue, that I would be closing them down. And so the Conservation Commission was aware of that.
And I'd just like to jump in here for a second. It is our standard operating procedure, if you will, to, you know, try to communicate with the town as best we can with the folks that are usually the managers of recreation lands that abut us. And in most cases, it is the Conservation Commission, and those are the folks we usually deal with because they have the management of those trails normally, and they have the vested interest in knowing what's going on the adjacent lands with any recreation trails.
Okay, in our town, we actually have conservation trails, rec trails, and town trails. So we have a little bit of everything. So conservation really is not the governing body in Litchfield over all the trails.
The Calvin's Loop Trail that you closed, that was an old logging road. At one time it was, back in the day. So wouldn't it make sense to have possibly kept that one open, whereas that has been, an area that has been used for probably centuries?
Um, Not necessarily, because the thing with our skid trails is that we do timber sale reentries, and once there's an established trail, most people really don't want us running our equipment down an established trail. So we typically try to keep trails off of logging road, skid trails, that will be grown back in with trees.
I'm looking at your old map that you have here of the state forest, and the one that you have your trails on. And most of those trails that I'm seeing are the old logging road that you had up there. I'm a resident of town, I've been here all my life, and I know that woods, because I own a chunk of land at the end of it. If it wasn't for that logging trail, I couldn't get my tractor up to cut the wood. But I remember back in the day when we spoke to the forester about going out there with a tractor to do it. We always did it, okay? And they had no problem with it. I just stayed out of the water. But a question here, my concern, if this went back in the spring, there should have been some relay of the information brought back to the officials. And that's us, okay? There should have been better communication. As Richard said, how did it all start? Well, it appears that it starts in the conservation, which they have some pros and cons like every other town has. But I'm actually, what I'm seeing here on the old map, those are the old trails that have been there for years, the old logging trails that we used to drive down.
I believe
Okay.
one or two of them might actually be an old stagecoach trail.
Well, the center trail that goes down through there comes from an old foundation up in Londonderry. It used to be the Hardy Farm. The only way to get to the Hardy Farm was to go down that state forest road, in and out. My grandparents remember them back there. That's how they used to come out of their house in the middle of the woods. It's right on the power line, right next to the power line out there, the foundation. Well, that's what that road was for years. It was a right of way to get in and out of houses fell down. So to me, guys, it's communication right from the beginning. If there's somebody's going to do something, at least you communicate it. I understand what you're saying. Conservation is your first. Some conservation commissions that the town, they don't have control of everything. This one does not. And the control that they have sometimes can be obsessive, I'll say. Okay, and we just want to make sure, because we have a group of nice folks in town. We're trying to have a place for people can go for a walk. The state forest, I understand, is a nice place. There's other private land. The town owns land out there too. I don't know if there are any trails coming out of that one. Future, but there's ways of doing it. That's how I feel. I think the lack of communication has brought this on.
In the future, would it be possible for you to communicate with the town administrator on anything that's going on in the Litchfield State Forest? Yeah, I believe
Most certainly, if that's the method you'd like us to communicate in the person, the point person, we could certainly do that.
We'd appreciate that, because I
When you
believe
go
you were
in-
notified, Troy, right, of the timber harvest plans?
We were.
Yeah, so
Yeah, so
part of it made it there.
Regarding the timber harness, the last time you went out there to cut the red pine, okay, what we call pole pine, okay, that was great. We found out the day you were out there, because that's when everybody knew. Okay, and if I remember right, the town of Litchfield's phone was ringing off the hook.
So we can bring that up when they go through it. Are there any more questions on just the trail portion of it?
I have none. Just communication.
Okay, thank you. If you want to move on to timber harvest, that'd be great.
all right, let me jump forward again here. Okay. All right. So we'll just touch on the upcoming timber sale in the future here. And I think it is important to note that we're actually required with our state land as part of state statute to notify the towns for timber sale projects. So that's actually part of state statute.
Tax-free.
So the area that we're going to be going back into here in Litchfield was last treated in 2004, which was 17 years ago. Hard to believe you can go back 17 years and not even be before 2000 anymore. So this harvest will complete the silvicultural prescription that was in that stand before. Basically coming back in to do the next entry for following the prescription that we had. And so this harvest is also very important at this time due to the presence of red pine scale, which was first found in the state of New Hampshire in 2012, I believe. And actually, excuse me, Bear Brook State Park in Allenstown was the first location where that was actually discovered in the state of New Hampshire. So since then, we've done a lot of work on our state properties trying to remove red pine before it becomes infected, because once the red pine does become infected, it declines into mortality of the trees very quickly. And so due to the quickness of mortality once red pine becomes infected, the state forest health specialist recommends for us to remove all the red pine from our stands whenever we possibly can. So the project area that we'll be working in this entry will cover 50 acres. It'll be an overstory removal. So we'll be coming in and removing all of the red pine that is in the overstory within these stands, and also most of the white pine, leaving 3 to 5 white pine trees per acre in the overstory to be a seed source for seeding the skid trails back in, and plus leaving some white oak here or there in the overstory as well to provide hard mast trees for wildlife. And so the
Billy,
timeline.
just
Yep.
Can I just cut in real quick?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add in, I was actually the forester who did the last sale there on Litchfield State Forest. And the prescription we did was called a shelter wood. And the design of that was to allow just enough light to the forest floor and get some scarification to the duff layer that the seed from the white pine would regenerate well. And that's what's happened over time. If you walk through there now, you can see there's a second layer underneath those tall mature trees that's very well developed, and it's mostly white pine. And there's a little bit of scattering of hardwoods depending on where you are, but that white pine will become the next forest. And so what Billy's trying to do is remove that red pine now and release that white pine that's in the understory to then receive more sunlight and grow faster, if you will, and compete against one another to become the next mature forest. Thanks, Billy.
Yep. So just to kind of give you guys an idea of the timeline that we go through with our timber sales. So right now we're in the public notification portion of it, where all direct abutters receive a letter in the mail notifying them of an upcoming timber sale, and we also send that to the Board of Selectmen and the Conservation Commission as well. And then we have a period where people can call and ask questions, if they have questions about the timber sale. And then the spring coming up fairly soon, we'll start doing some layout and marking of the trees that are going to be cut. So you'll be seeing some flagging going up out in the woods. and you'll see some blue paint on the trees. And the trees with the blue paint will be the ones that will be getting cut. And then in the spring of 2021, since this is a very public area and gets a lot of recreation and use, we will be doing a public walk or a public informational tour. We haven't picked a date for that yet, so that's why I don't have a specific date. But we'll be having public walk for people to be able to come walk it with the foresters, ask questions, and we can explain the timber sale if there's any concerns. And then in the summer, we'll have a timber sale showing with prospective bidders, and then we'll be going through the bid process of awarding the sale to a contractor. And then this timber sale is going to have a 2-year contract period to make sure that they have adequate time and ground conditions to get that done. Winters are getting shorter and shorter and not as cold as they used to be, so it's important to give, we find 2-year contracts just gives the logger a little extra time to make sure it's the right time to be in there. And so the sale contract period where someone could actually be in there working and cutting wood would be from September 15th to March 31st of each of those years. So it would be from this coming September 15th to March 31st of 2022, and then there would be no one in there for the spring or the summer. And then the following, if they hadn't completed the sale, they would have that same operating window for 2022 and 2023. This timber sale time frame, there's some endangered species out on Litchfield State Forest that Fish and Game has interest in, and so this time frame of September 15th protects that species, and so that's why we're limited to starting no earlier than September 15th. And so while the timber sale is going on, some of you who've been in town long enough to some of the other timber sales there know that we utilize the road or the trail coming out into the parking lot there off of Albuquerque Ave. And so we'll be utilizing that roadway again for log trucks, and then the first clearing on the left will be where the log yard will be. And then, so we'll have to be closing down that parking lot, and then at least some of the trails. Once we get the layout completed, we'll have a better idea of, if we have to close down all the trails. But it's just important to try to keep people out of there. It doesn't always work, but we try to keep people out to just keep people safer, because they usually don't know how close or far they can actually be from some of this equipment.
Let's get the people with bicycles out of the woods. A question.
Yep.
I'm looking at your old map that you sent down with the timber cut request. I'm seeing
Yes.
the bluish purple, whatever you want to call it. Well, depends which shade you are at the time.
Yep.
That's the red pine area you talk about cutting.
Yep. So I'll actually that map is like the next slide in. So
Yeah. Okay.
I'll get to that.
Okay.
So just if people haven't been out in Litchfield State Forest before, these are pictures of a couple of the stands that we'll be treating. So the large trees here that you can see, what we call the overstory, or the tallest trees there, are mostly red pine. There's some white pines also in there. And then you can see here in this understory, you can see these younger white pines and a little bit of hardwood that's grown up. And so that's the result of Scott's previous timber sale in 2004. which did an excellent job of regenerating good quality trees. And most of these trees now, these younger trees are 16 feet or taller. And really that's really the longest you want to go before you release those and take that overstory off. If we waited any longer, we would really start to stagnate that growth of those new younger trees. Yep. So this is the map of the project area. It covers pretty much all the red pine. There's one other small area, couple acres in size of red pine that's over here, but I think it was planted. All this red pine was planted a long time ago, and so I think this other red pine was planted later than this, and so it's smaller diameter. And right now, our management goals for this property really say we can't do what we call regenerating or taking the overstory off of more than 50 acres on this property. And so I'm kind of leaving that last little bit smaller in diameter and hoping that it'll still be alive when we come back in the next entry. So you can see here, so the parking lot on Albuquerque would be right here, if you can see my mouse, and then this is Hillcrest Road. And so this stand of red pine does go right up to the road, and we will be removing all of that red pine right up to the road, because if we leave it, it'll get red pine scale eventually, and it'll die. All those trees will die and create a pretty major hazard. With hundreds of dead trees right next to those roads, as well as along the trail. And so that's why hitting those areas along the trail are really important. Because we don't want to create more hazards for people with standing dead trees in there. So did you have another question about the map?
Yeah, so the 50% rule doesn't apply along the road, huh?
So we'll be getting a basal area variance for that because of the forest health concern, and that will allow us to remove that.
I understand.
Yep.
One more thing I'd like to bring up to the board. When I listened to it, I listened to you the other night when you were with the Conservation Commission. You talked about putting up a gate.
Yep.
I think it's the best thing that they ever did to get rid of the rocks. There's one main reason for it. In all my years of being here, the state forest burns occasionally. The fire department has always used that to get to the fires, no matter where. Where it's in Musquash, in Londonderry, that's how we used to get to Londonderry. Was up there through the fires along the power lines and that. So we'd like to keep that clear. The fire department can use that logging road all the time. A gate would be the best thing. The rocks really don't serve any purpose because you can't get anywhere if you got to go back there.
Right.
I think that's important. You mentioned that the other night.
Yep.
Yes, we did.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because that reminds me to mention that as part of this timber sale, we realized that parking lot that's there right now is pretty small, and it's kind of inconvenient because a couple people pull in one direction, a couple people pull in another direction, and then you can fit 4 cars and you're pretty much boxed in. So as part of this sale, we will actually be working and having the contractor actually expand that parking lot a little bit, so we can hopefully fit a few more cars in there, as well as be able to organize the parking better to help facilitate that. And then also, installing that gate, to make emergency services be able to access into the forest easier. So just kind of an example of some red pine scale. So this is in Bear Brook State Park. When red pine scale was first discovered there, in 2012. So you kind of saw the pictures of the red pine that's in Litchfield right now, and you can see in this kind of full stand picture, you can see that browning in the lower part of the crowns, and so that's the infestation of the scale insect. They get in by the base of the needles and attack the tree there. And so then these trees here up in the crowns, you can see that the lower branches are starting to die, and eventually just the whole top will turn brown, and the tree will die within a matter of years. Typically, really only 3 to 4 years. And here's a couple other pictures. You can see a little better, the dead branches really starting to pop out in these trees. So we're really trying to capture our other red pine stands before this happens. Especially a place like Litchfield, that could really be a hazard with all the people going through there. And so that is pretty much all I got. If people have other questions or.
Maybe just a suggestion, when you do your walk in the spring, maybe if it's possible, you could consult with the trail group that's trying to form here in town. They would like nothing better than to work with you on these trails and try to achieve the same goals that you guys are. Is that a possibility to invite them along?
Yeah, they're more than welcome to attend. Yeah, it's open to the public, so anybody can attend that would like to.
And
And
you'll work that notice back through the town administrator?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Will you work the public notice for about the trail walk, the cut walk back through the town administrator for us?
Yes, I can. Yeah, we typically post it in local newspapers. But yeah, it would probably be worthwhile posting it on your website as well.
Yeah, there's not too many local newspapers left around here.
I'm curious about the timber sale. Do you generate revenue from this?
Yes, we do.
Does that go into the state coffer?
It does. It goes into a fund that supports our department. Yeah. So it doesn't go into the state general fund. It goes into a separate fund that supports our department.
How much revenue do you anticipate you will generate from this timber sale?
It's hard to say depending on what the markets are like when the red pine goes out, to bid. It's been up and down the past couple years. But Billy, I don't know, you probably put a guesstimate on that.
Yeah, geez, just totally off my head, I can't remember. Somewhere around 50 grand probably. But when
it's 50 acres,
No, $50,000.
$50,000.
but how many acres are you harvesting?
Yes, it's 50 acres as well. Yeah.
Oh, about $1,000 an acre.
Yeah, roughly. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into that. As far as what the markets are and what the loggers bid, when the sale comes up.
So the red pine that is infected, is it still saleable?
To a point. So right now, it is still saleable, and so the pictures that I showed you from Bear Brook State Park, that was still saleable. But once that tree totally dies, it'll die and it'll end up getting what we call blue stain within the wood, and at that point, it's no longer merchantable. It's just a low quality pulp product at that point.
And we don't have any more paper mills.
Exactly.
No.
Can we use them for bridges on wetlands this time? No.
Go ahead, Ms. Queenan.
I just have a question because I'm not familiar with this, the trail system there, but is there hunting going on in there? at
Yeah,
certain
there's always
times of the
hunting here
year?
all the time.
Do we need to
They know that.
How
You
do they know
cannot
that?
stop the hunting at all.
Even if they're in there doing timbering?
Well, if they're in there, don't worry, the deer won't be around, the hunters won't be with them.
But I don't want them shot either.
I'm pretty sure they've been there before.
Billy and Scott, can you please speak to that?
Sure, we've had this question actually come up several times over the past couple of years. It's kind of funny, but we've had logging operations for as long as I've been alive, and hunters using the same area, and I've never heard of a hunter shooting a logger, or if he did, he'd probably get run over by the logger eventually. But it's never been an issue as far as safety. I mean, most hunters are smart enough that they stay out of that particular area that's being worked in, and there's never been an issue. But yeah, that is a good question though.
I can say this.
Do you post that you're logging?
Yes, we put signs up, some yellow logging signs. It sort of just tells you please stay out of the area, or at the entrance, and usually any visible entrance into the forest itself, whether it be a trail or an old woods road.
Sometimes I see a car parked on the side of the road on Hillcrest, you know
He's
they
hunting.
entered in.
During hunting season, that's where they park there. And they go into that side. I used to hunt up there the same way.
Yeah, and it's for a hunter, he won't have to get too far in before he knows that we're
He'll hear
we're
you.
walking. So yeah, exactly.
We appreciate it, the hunters did, because once you get the trees clear, the following year, you got a better sight.
I just have a couple of questions, just so I can understand. So the planning and construction of the parking lot, kind of interested in that development. I'm glad that the state is looking at making improvements there. As you know, this is kind of becoming the center of our community. And we have the bike path, which is 6 miles. We have Musquash Conservation Area. It's over 1,000 acres of recreation area of trails and conservation land. And this seems to be a connection point, one of the connection points to this area for passive recreation. So the people that are using the trail system and the conservation land here at the Litchfield State Forest, the Litchfield Conservation Area and Londonderry Conservation Area, it's not all Litchfield residents. They're coming from all over the area. And we see them, walking the dogs, cross-country running, mountain bikers. The construction and planning of that parking lot, I think, deserves a lot of local input. And was wondering, has the state typically taken the approach where they would do a courtesy review with our planning board? Or is this something that you would just go off and design on your own and make your own decisions on the size of the parking lot, the material that would be used for guardrails, the signage and stuff like that?
Yes, to your second point, this is something we do internally on our state reservations, and the planning all happens in-house. We have our own engineers as well as designers that we consult. Although a parking lot like this, is pretty. It's usually a pretty low key item to construct, so it's not something that you would see in, let's say, a state park developed in a parking lot to that scale or to that style, I guess, where you're describing guardrails and other things. There will be a kiosk, whether there's guardrails or not, or whether there's some large stones that we put around the perimeter. We haven't ironed those details out yet.
Yeah, I guess my point is, and I don't know what it would look like. I think it's important for this town to actually know what the plan is and to know what you're planning to construct, and if there's going to be guardrails or no guardrails, if there's going to be a fence. That kind of discussion, I think, really deserves to take place in this town before it's just built. And the reason I say that, again, is that we have our municipal complex that abuts this facility. We have Sawmill Park that's just down the road, which is our tennis courts and soccer fields. This is becoming the center of our community. And to just wake up one day and see what the state thinks, is sufficient for their park. I think that lacks cooperation between the state and the town.
Okay.
Well, we can certainly send you the design.
I just think it's a mistake if we don't communicate very early about what the state's planning to construct. We need a parking lot there. I watch what goes on. I use that parking lot 3 to 4 times a week. And I have seen tremendous increase in the use of this trail system. We have cars parking everywhere. I've seen near misses with kids getting out of their cars and dogs running in the street. And I just think that there needs to be a conversation with, and I don't know who that is. I don't know if it's the Board of Selectmen. The most appropriate group is our planning board. And we've seen our fire department, our school system go through a courtesy review with our planning board. And it's a very healthy, open, transparent process where there's a lot of good that comes out of it. So I just ask, since there's an opportunity here to plant that seed, that be a consideration.
Sure, we can entertain that.
And so I guess just to give you a little idea of what we're actually thinking. So the next time you're out there, you can just take a look at it and see. So it's not really like, we're not building a parking lot that's going to fit 50 cars. What we're thinking is probably pushing the parking lot back about another 2 to 3 trees. So if you go out there right now and look, so, there's a parking lot, so there'll be one set of trees and then kind of the next set of trees, and then, maybe the third set of trees, and then the same, if you're standing on Albuquerque and looking off to the right, the same thing, kind of 2 trees back that way. So basically the idea is to kind of make something that people can pull up into the center and then park either to the left or the right. So it gives them the ability to pull in and not block each other in. So total, there's maybe 6 or 8 cars, because if we build a bigger parking lot, then we're eating into our forest resource there, our timber stands, and then it kind of starts to fall into the same thing where it's not balancing the resources.
And I'm not trying to point out that I want a bigger parking lot or smaller parking lot, the way it's laid out. I'm just trying to make sure we're communicating that parking lot is insufficient today and has been for several years because of the increase in use of the land. And so just to make sure that I think it's a healthy process that the state and town works together on just discussing what it's going to look like and how it's going to work. And a follow-up question, does these types of state facilities and parks, I'm not sure, do you folks plow that parking lot? I mean, it's not really a parking lot right now. It's kind of just an access road. But do you plow the parking lot? You plow
No.
other state parking lots?
No, we don't. No, we don't plow any parking lots other than our developed recreation areas. Like Bear Brook State Park, the snowmobile parking lot, and that sort of thing. Those are plowed, but this is a low impact passive recreation. So there's no managed recreational aspects to these types of state lands, these state reservations.
Chair. To follow up on what Troy is saying, I'm not a firm believer. I understand what you're trying to do. This is not a big parking lot. This is just to get more cars back there. We have parking here in the town hall. I see empty all the time. So we can put some parking here if the people just cut through. I think if you came in with the layout, the biggest issue I think you're gonna have, and the town's gonna have, is accessibility of anything getting back there. Other than, through the gates, the rocks are gonna be your friend. If you find some rocks, and we know people who have rocks, okay? Lay it out and keep everybody out. That's why the rocks are there in the first place, was to keep the folks from driving back there. But when the fire department came in, it's hard to get in the vehicle by those rocks. So I think, come in with your layout, bring it to the board, We'll look at it and do just for practicality.
And
I'll leave it at that, 'cause
I
this
just
is not-
have one other question too, and then I'll stop because I know we want to move on. But just for my own interest, probably this is more personal interest because I'm a user of the state park. Like I said, 3 to 4 days a week throughout the year. The main trail that, I don't know what you call it. I just call it the main logging trail.
Yep.
That goes all the way into,
London.
Londonderry. When you put together your logging plan, are there areas of that trail that currently right now are not really, I don't know if the word is managed properly, but there's no drainage. Whoever logged it the last time or however this trail was built over the years, the drainage is not working. Is that part of the bidding process that these loggers would be expected to make some improvements? Actually improve it better than existing conditions? Is that ever, something that comes up during this public walk and you look for public input that can be addressed?
So that would really depend. Typically, the only areas of like trails or roads that a logger, or we ask a logger to upgrade would be anything, between the road, the main road and the log yard. Are you talking about heading out towards Musquash or towards
There's
Aldrich?
I know the first area is, I call it rhododendrons. And, the logging trucks over the last 2 harvests must have just, John Deere skidders, they just sink the ground a good, 18 inches and then water's trapped within the trail system and it's not able to drain.
So the gut
So
is
we
the
have to walk around, into the rhododendrons and along the edge instead of staying on the main trail. So I just didn't know if sometimes these loggers are required to bring in gravel, crushed stone, put in a culvert or something and just improve the drainage so that they can access their equipment without causing more damage. But I'm
Yeah.
assuming that kind of discussion comes during the public walk and that's why you want the public walk.
It would come as part of our layout and our, our our inventory. I know the spot that you're talking about. And that's going to be past where the log trucks are going for this harvest.
Okay.
But it may be something that we can look at, addressing. When they have a piece of equipment in there, we may just be able to have them go down and kind of smooth that area, fill in that indentation with some existing material that's there to help that water drain off.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. You have the opportunity, you're in there with the heavy equipment. So,
We're
all
trying to
right,
make
thank you.
wetlands, and you're trying to fill them in.
Okay, do we have any other questions?
No, just appreciate you guys coming on and talking to us. We do.
Thanks for having us.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you,
very much.
gentlemen. We
You were
greatly
very,
appreciate it.
very responsive to
Yep.
my email and I very much appreciate it, your promptness to the response.
Yep, and I'll be getting back to you with some other information here at some point. So
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you very much. Have a
Thank you,
wonderful
sir.
evening.
Have a good night.
thank
You
you
too.
guys.
Seeing that it is 7:40, I'd like to open it to public input. Do we have any members of the public that would like to comment this evening?
John?
Hearing none, we will close public input. We had no items removed from consent, so we have nothing to speak about there. Next would be the town administrator report. Mr. Brown.
Nothing really to report. Obviously, we just finished up our deliberative session, so I'm working with the school district again this year, putting together the voter's guide. Michelle has reached out to me this morning, and it looks like with her schedule, she'll need to have the town's final draft by the end of this week. So there's not much, if you look at your calendar, there's not a lot of time between now and March 9th. It's pretty quick. I don't know what's happened this year. It just all came quickly. So that's what I'll be working on.
Okay, great.
Working on. the same plan as last year, working jointly with the school. It'll go out electronically,
I
but
think that worked out
also
well
do
last year.
it'll be a mailing as well.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Next, Selectmen reports. Ms. Queen.
Heritage Commission meets tomorrow night at 7 PM. It'll be a remote meeting. The details are on our town website. NRPC will meet next on March 17th. Details are on the National Regional Planning Commission website. That's probably remote as well. And that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Recreation meets tomorrow evening, so we'll have a update next meeting for that. I did sit in on the Conservation Commission, which we heard tonight. They also sent a note to the ZBA about the gas station that they approved the variance that was looking for, that they were okay with it. Mr. Larry?
We had the deliberative Saturday, so budget season's over for a while.
Get a break.
Get a break. Get a
Mr.
break.
Lynch?
Nothing really to report.
Mr. LaSalle's?
One of my duties of a legislature, I serve on the municipal and county government committee. And we have a pending bill that has to do with perambulation. And that was something that was new to me. And come to find out, we have a duty as selectmen every 7 years to perambulate here in Litchfield, which means to
It's gonna be a long walk.
walk the town lines, basically, although you don't have to really walk, but we have to discover where all the markers are, the historical markers. In a lot of cases, these go back centuries. And the bill that would eliminate that duty to do it and sort of make it optional. And I suspect that it's never going to get out of committee because all the input we've had is negative toward it, that a lot of people see a real value in doing this perambulation. And Troy and I had a telephone conversation about it. And I think that I'm not really one to talk about doing it, but I think at some point this summer, we need to think about, go out and somehow do this perambulation. And Kevin says that the records for in town clerk has it in the vital records. So it's piqued my interest, and I'm interested in where all these markers are, because I know they exist in town. But it'll be interesting to, and I guess the input that we've gotten so far is that although GPS has a use, in these cases, when you're getting right down to these stone markers, they really don't suffice. You know, it's not, you have to go out and cite these things.
They'll get you close.
Yeah. So something to think about for the summertime.
Oh, you'll love it
When
when
we,
mosquito season comes.
when we finished our conversation, then I thought of another thing that I've heard of in other towns. When they go out and do this every 7 years, they not only do they sometimes discover that the town boundary has been moved or it's missing, it happens. I've also heard, there's another reason for keeping it on the books, is that just discovery of, illegal activity, illegal timber harvest or dumping of waste material. Things can be discovered
Growing stuff.
when the boots are on the ground. So that's another, I'm sure it came up at the state.
It's an
discussion.
agricultural town. We have a lot of thrifty people out in the woods.
Great, thank you. We have no other business. We do have one other item this evening. It is a non-public session under RSA 91A:3 2C reputation. We'll only be coming out of non-public to adjourn or to take motions on anything that happened in non-public. Do we have a motion to go into non-public?
Make a motion going to non-public.
We have a motion by Mr. Lynch. Roll call, Ms. Greenan.
Yes.
I am also yes. Mr. Larry?
Aye.
Mr. Lynch?
Aye.
Mr. LaSalle's?
Aye.
We are now in non-public. Thank you for tuning in, and everyone be well, please. Take care.